continues, you can imagine how utterly addicted. I mean, hope is the crack cocaine of the palliative care community, really.
You know, every time I speak with you on the phone, you're very up to date on what's going on in the world. And I'm wondering how you stay informed and aware of the destruction and collapse and still keep your heart open. How do you keep yourself inspired, Andrew?
First of all, thank you for saying that I am well up on things, because I think that's actually a responsibility of our time. So many people.
What specific effects of climate change, habitat destruction, or human systems collapse are you imagining occurring that would affect you and your loved ones or your community?
I mean, in many ways, I've been tracking habitat shifts throughout my lifetime. Just tracking in one area of Maine that I've gone to every summer since I was a child, tracking the loss of species in the ocean throughout my lifetime. It's been pretty radical in the last.
And so I want to fill that gap, and this is a long way of saying that I think that you talking about this culture being suicidal is desperately important.
So it's demanding urgent action. There should be red lights everywhere. Alarms that should be going off, but it seems people think it's not happening, or it's a joke, or it's a fantasy, or a delusion. I have no idea, but I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, and that's
We're very, very excited about tonight, and we're excited about the next 5 weeks. And very excited to have all of you with us. The fact that you registered for this event and that you're here is huge. So thank you. And I want to introduce you, first of all, my friend and colleague, Peter Melton, who's done wonderful things for Team Baker in the last year or so in promoting and marketing. And he has helped us enormously. We've all worked together, all three of us, to put this together. And I so appreciate Peter's work. Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you for that warm welcome. It has been quite a treat to work closely with you and Dean and others on Team Baker as we figure out ways to reach out with this all-important information and this all-important process of how do we sit with the information that we find ourselves grappling with. And for me, it's been quite a journey of years, heavy duty, diving into this and daring to feel it and daring to look at the edges and daring to do what all of you have done here tonight who are live and all of you who will hear this, daring to dig deep into how will I show up? How will humanity move through me? What choices will I make? Claiming control of your own destiny amidst the situation that we have very little control of. So it's great to be here with all of you, and really we're all here for the first time. No one's been here before, so it's not that any of us are experts. Probably most of you on the call could be panelists on this kind of a webinar as well, that we're all just experiencing this the way that we are and from all the different angles. And so your voice is important, and thank you for being here to listen and to share. I get to lead that into or introducing to you the other member here on the team that you see. The three of us have put this symposium together over the past several months, and so excited that it's actually here. And that's Dean Walker. And Dean, 25-year history of designing and delivering transformational-based trainings. He's done it for corporate executives, but also at the community level across the US, Europe, and Asia. He's offered his coaching and consulting to thousands of clients, helping them focus on the quality of presence and being. You know, those are the words I was kind of dancing around in that introduction, but that how do we show up? How does humanity move through us? Really narrows down to those words. What is our presence and how are we being? What is our beingness? And he's done that with organizations, families, relationships, individuals all over. So it's been beautiful to have Dean's wisdom and structure and experience on board with all this. Also, been focusing quite a bit on a book that's just about to come out and a podcast and a whole bunch of other stuff as he goes to share how this is moving through him in what he calls the impossible conversation. It's virtually identical to this symposium by daring to say, how do we come up with what we think is real, and then who will we be together in the face of humanity's greatest challenges? And with that, I welcome you, Dean, to the group, to the lifeboat. Here we are.
Thank you, Peter, and yeah, warm introduction, and I appreciate it. And a hearty welcome to everybody who's signed up and has shown up for the symposium. This is the first session of it. Really a pleasure. So I'd like to just complete the round robin of introductions. For those, I think the vast majority of folks who are attending this symposium know Carolyn Baker, know Peter Melton, or know me, and perhaps all three. But just in case there are some folks that particularly for whom Carolyn Baker is a new name, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about her. Carolyn Baker has a lifetime full of achievement as a therapist, author, and earning her PhD and much more. But it is in the past 10 years or so that Carolyn has truly taken off. It's not exaggerating to say that Carolyn Baker is the single most prolific author and now life coach addressing the issues of how to face the imminent global climate crisis and human systems collapse in a sane and human way. Carolyn's the host of the long-running Lifeboat Hour and the producer of her email collapse-aware news service, The Daily News Digest, and the author of many books, including Love in the Age of Ecological Apocalypse, Collapsing Consciously, Navigating the Coming Chaos, her book, co-written with Guy McPherson, Extinction Dialogues, and her most recent book, which we hope to cover. I hope we'll do a lot of covering of her book, Dark Gold, The Human Shadow and the Global Crisis. And that might have to wait till the last session of this symposium, but I hope we spend quite a bit of time on that, Carolyn. And it's a pleasure to be co-producing with Carolyn. She's a gem to work with, but far more importantly, she really walks her talk in this impossibly delicate topic and work with people. Thanks for having me on the team, Carolyn, and welcome to your own symposium.
Well, thank you both, Dean and Peter. Thank you for just being so there and so reliable, that, shoulders that I can lean on. And it's been last 7 months, really. It's been about 7 months that we've all been working on this together. So tonight is really special for us, and I hope it's very special for you. So in this symposium now, we're going to all imagine ourselves getting into a lifeboat. I have the Lifeboat Hour radio show, but I think the lifeboat is a really good image for what we're doing in this symposium. We're climbing into this lifeboat together to sail, to take this journey together. And that lifeboat is a container. And we're doing this together because none of us is going to be able to navigate these waters by ourselves. And so a very short poem that I like to start gatherings with is a short poem by Rafael Jesus Gonzalez. The distance between us is holy ground, to be traversed, feet bare, arms raised in joyous dance so that it can be crossed. And the tracks of our pilgrimage shine in the darkness to light our coming together in a bright and steady light. The distance between us is holy ground. I'd like us to take just a moment to stop and be in silence for maybe 2 minutes, wherever you are, sitting in your chair, to just move away from the computer a bit and take a couple of long, slow, deep breaths to just begin to ground yourself for where we're going on this journey together. And then to just take another breath and begin to come back to this moment. One of the things that we're going to be doing is slowing down. We all come in from fast-paced, alienated, hurried experiences in our lives. But in this symposium, we're going to slow down and be present for the amazing richness that is really here for us. And so I believe that the next thing on our agenda is to do some housekeeping in terms of ground rules and how we're going to navigate and do the logistics of this symposium together.
Thank you, Carolyn. That grounding, that slowing down is so key in this process, and finding ways to do that for ourselves and catch ourselves, myself, catch those times when we're saying you should do something, and make sure we make that an I should do something as well. So to help us be in this lifeboat, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. And in general, please, in the chat section, any questions that come up for you regarding anything, please bring them out. I mean, here we are. I think there's roughly 30 of us online now, and quite a few more who will be watching this in its recorded state. So in general, we're creating a lifeboat, like Carolyn said, and a chance for us to be here together, although it's virtual, to make the most of this opportunity that we have to be in a virtual lifeboat together, to share as deep. And when we ask questions that are for you to write in the chat area, please do if you're so inspired. Again, if the chat is distracting to you in any way, I understand if you don't want to use it, but for many, it's a chance to feel connected. Maybe I'll start there. I'm guessing most of you are able to see the button that tells you that you can be part of the chat there at the top of your screen. It'll say audio settings, Q&A, chat, and then raise hand. So you shouldn't have to deal with the audio settings. And for the most part, we're not going to be doing Q&A, but the chat button will be the best. And then the other thing for us panelists, when we type, we can really hear that. So we have to mute ourselves when we need to type. And I know that was me 2 minutes ago. So we're learning. And then the raise hand. I think the way we do the chat feature is not to use the raise hand and not to use the Q&A by and large. But if you have something you want to just say in general, you put it into the chat. If you have something you want to say in particular, you go just to the all panelists button, which should be in the upper, I think in the upper left, or even also right down by where you're typing, if you just want to send something to us. And if you have a burning share, then that's the time to go to all panelists or to everyone. But if it's really a burning something, then we want to be able to know that it lives in you that way. And so we're asking you to put a couple asterisks to start your chat if it's something that you're really just feeling discombobulated about, or something you really want to make sure we mention. And there may also be a chance for some of you to come on and have your beautiful faces on the screen as well. And if that's calling out to you, then the asterisks, and then put speak, that you want to speak this question, or perhaps you have what feels like a more involved question you want to work with. So we're trying to make this as much as we can like actually sitting in a circle, to where you could raise your hand, and raise your hand really strongly to say, I really need to speak this, or I can't feel like I'm moving forward. So again, any general comments, just put them in there to everybody. Specific comments that you're feeling really drawn to, then asterisk, and we can do that way. I think in general that covers covers where we're at here. Obviously, it's confidential to the degree that it is. If you put yourself into the chat, then people will see your name, so they'll know that that's from you. And if you go just to all panelists with something that you need to talk about, then mention with us. Also, as Dean mentioned about Carolyn, she's done a lot of counseling. Sometimes this kind of work and this kind of exploration leaves you feeling like you really need more. And so feel free in the all panelists to mention that if you're feeling drawn at any time for deeper questioning regarding some of these topics, and we can get you more information, help you out as best we can. Dean mentioned a bunch of Carolyn's books and that she does have all kinds of programs to help as well. So that will cover the housekeeping for now.
Okay.
And Carolyn mentioned there, which is a good thing, that these sessions will be replayed. You will get a link. Dean, why don't you tell them about how they're going to get their links and what that's going to look like so they can replay this for themselves?
Yeah. In between each of these sessions, of course, we have Tuesday and Thursday sessions for, I believe it's the next 5 weeks. In between each session, we will send you an additional email to sort of prepare you, offer you some more poetry, possibly some bit of homework suggestion, particularly something to support more of the journaling that we'll get into later, our request for you to do that. But a part of each of those emails will be an update about the various earlier episodes of the symposium that will be recorded, and then we'll get them up online, and we will send you the link to reach to it, and then the password to be able to activate your on-demand watching of that whenever you'd like. So if you ever have a question, we will also include our contact information, particularly my email, if you've got a question about how to get a hold of and watch on demand any of the previous episodes. So we should have you covered. We should be able to get you connected with any of the prior sessions that you want to be connected with. So panelists, nod at me if you think that's the end of our logistics. I think it is. All right. I'd like to just take a moment to breathe. You know, we promised you in this symposium that we are going to spend the vast majority of the time of this symposium not in our heads, not in the delivery of more data about the rather crisis level situation that we've got going on in the world. There will be some of that, and I'm about to deliver about all you're going to hear of it in the entire symposium. But even at this point, I'd like to just ask us that we take a deep breath together. Notice the miracle that it is that we're connected the way we are in different places around the world all at the same time. And we're here with enough alignment, enough shared vision that we want to share with one another about this incredible topic. How do we bring forth optimal presence? How do we open our hearts together in the face of these remarkable times? And so, again, here's the paradox. We decided a little while back that we would wrap up the heady portion of the symposium here at the very beginning, because this isn't just a review of data that you've probably heard before, although this is a reflection of 2 years solid of research that I've done to vet the abrupt climate change information that I was exposed to, again, a couple of years ago. This is what I'm hoping to do by sharing this next few minutes with you is to get us onto the same page. Because one thing I've noticed after having so many conversations about climate change is that there are so many different points of view about it, so many different levels of resistance about it, and so many different interpretations of the thousands of terms that there are to know, to be able to learn how to learn about climate change. So I'm hoping to give you a condensed version again of my progression through the past couple of years in preparation for writing the book that I have forthcoming in the next couple of months. And with the hopes of getting us onto at least a similar or nearby page with one another when we say various terms in the symposium in our time together, that we'll have at least a strong sense of what we're each talking about. So it might be a good time to take a nice deep breath. You might even shake out your arms a little bit. You know, I'd like to shake out my spine a little bit to break pattern, break the way I'm holding my body.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. I needed that, and so I was guessing that maybe some other folks did too. As you know, all it takes to get to bring yourself to the start of something, and here we are, and we're getting some of the ground rules and some of the preliminary stuff squared up. But you know, owning this in our body is another huge part of it. And Dean, you always bring this up, and so I'm so thankful that you spearhead that for us. Is that time out? We've got to shake. We got to make sure that our bodies are here too.
Yeah.
Well, it's because I know what's coming up and nobody else does.
All right. So here we go. So what is this thing, climate change? And why should I care about it with so many other important things going on in my world? We all use the same words, but chances are we're using very different definitions of terms and ideas. A brief history of me: 30 years of personal growth practices and training, meditation, awareness of environmental issues, and just, you know, I've always cared. I've always cared about what was going on in our world and with the environment, and I considered myself fairly well informed. Then about 2 years ago, I got exposed to abrupt climate change information. Went to a presentation by a guy named Guy McPherson. And long story short, the gist of his presentation told me that his assessment, his way of putting together the various findings that he had gathered from other research climate scientists who are actively doing the research, was that we could easily see 3 to 5 degrees centigrade of global temperature rise by 2030. Now, for those who are not familiar with that jargon, there's a bit there to tease apart, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. Just basically what there is to know about it essentially is that's a devastating temperature rise. 3 to 5 degrees may not seem like much, but in terms of the kind of climate science that's being done these days and the sensitivity of their measures, that is devastating. And then to be able to see that by 2030 is extraordinary. So I'll just continue. My jaw dropped, and I was left with 2 questions after realizing that was what was just put in my lap. Is this for real? Or is this, tinfoil hat crazy talk? So is this for real? And if it is real, why aren't we talking about this 24/7 on every channel, on every television around the world? So my first self-assigned task was to vet or confirm the validity of this information and projected timeline. I had to learn how to learn about climate change, and then I had to learn how to learn about abrupt climate change. My book is coming out soon. It starts with a full detailing of this research, or what I call an informed inquiry process, and I'll describe that a little bit more later, as will Carolyn. And the book goes on to explore our collective and personal shadow and resistance to facing reality, and how to face our challenges in an empowered, responsible way. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm happy to share my resources, any of these resources that I discovered, in my process with you in the symposium. All you need to do is send me an email. If you have an interest in more depth, I'm happy to share at any time. So just take note of the things that draw your attention or draw your interest that I might be able to offer to you, and I'm happy to do so. A quick note here. There's the premier agency on the planet regarding climate change is called the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel of regarding climate change. The projections from that panel were ended up being of very little use to me. I discovered that they bias their information, their reporting to the public in a very conservative way. And so while you'll recall that I was just saying the abrupt climate change projections were 3 to 5 degrees C of global temperature rise by 2030, the average IPCC report offers projections of 3 degrees C by 2100. So a substantial and conservative difference. And it's worth noting here that every line of the public reports that are given out by the IPCC for public consumption is edited by corporate and government representatives before it reaches our eyes. So extraordinary bias. And I'm happy again to go into more detail for those who would like more about that offline. Another note is, yes, it's very important for us all to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions immediately, but it's very important to know that Earth systems are just now dealing with the effects of greenhouse gas emissions from 10 to 20 years ago. So each year we are going to be feeling the effects of our global emissions from approximately the 90s, in addition to the more immediate cause and effect loops that are present now. The 90s and beyond has been our most intense increase of global CO2 output in humanity's history. Lastly, while researching the current state of climate change impacts today, I was floored to read in a UN article that we are currently losing to extinction 150 to 200 species a day. Currently, now. Anyway, once I did this learning and research, I did in fact validate the abrupt climate change information to my standards and capacity. In other words, what I could get my head around. And to keep it simple, I ended up with 4 to 5 degrees centigrade temperature rise by 2050. This meant I toned down the use of more than 50 what are called positive feedback loops that are now being tracked as potential accelerators of climate change around the world. And that the use of those were primary in that initial report that I was telling you about receiving from Guy McPherson. You can track on Guy McPherson's website. He has an ongoing, ever-growing list of positive feedback loops that, from his interpretation, have us aim toward 5 degrees C by 2030. Okay, so I got my rendition of this thing winnowed down to 4 to 5 degrees C by 2050. What does that mean? Once again, I had to do some research into the way that scientists use modeling, computer modeling, to figure out what will this planet look like under the effects of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees C, and so on. With 4 to 5 degrees C, the average projection is for a steady, dramatic downgrade in our global habitat, including global food crop decline, water shortages, ever warming and acidifying oceans, ever accelerating ice melt and sea level rise of 10 feet or more. All of those symptoms of habitat collapse promise to continue to grow continuously between now and the projected target of 4 to 5 degrees C by 2050 and beyond. It's hard to overstate the immense human stress that will accompany the inevitable collapse of human systems. that will be tied to these downgrade steps of global habitat. One interpretation of the paleoclimate records and projections about global temperature rise is that man has never lived on Earth at 3.5 degrees C above what's called baseline before the Industrial Revolution. I was unable to find a single projection of what life would be like above 3C that didn't include some terms like catastrophic, unimaginable, deadly, mass suffering, etc. These were reports by such left-wing hippie sources as the US military, the US Secretary of State's office under George H.W. Bush, the World Bank, Shell Oil, the International Energy Agency, and many more. Please understand, I'm not interested in you just blindly ingesting my research results. I invite you to do your own vetting of the projections I have found and formulated for myself. I'm suggesting that we all are doing this kind of winging it, formulating on our own. We're literally making shit up. Only we usually do it by listening to a very biased and unclean information source. How about all of mainstream media? And not doing due diligence for ourselves by going in depth into vetted scientific based source. I assert that that is how most of us put together most of our opinions and passions. We paste together poorly researched, emotionally charged interpretations based on infotainment, news, and unvetted science and research. Or we choose the path of denial and avoid seeking out the much needed solid science and information that would give us a solid foundation to be more responsible for our participation in this global thing we call life. That last couple of sentences is just basically me calling myself on myself. That's what I did. I thought I was pretty environmentally aware. And when I found this stuff out, and then when I took on the research to vet it, it was extraordinarily humbling how little I knew and how much I was really resisting knowing. There's a phrase in the training industry called, "What are you pretending not to know?" I was pretending not to know an awful lot, but we'll get to there later in the symposium. So I propose for the purposes of the symposium that we all try on for size these findings, that we can look forward to a 3 to 5 degrees C increase, global increase in average temperatures by 2050, and all the systems collapse and so on that accompanies that kind of increase. Aligning on one set of data and projections will allow us to share a language and relate more clearly with each other as we shift to step 2 of the informed inquiry process. We'll get to what that means in just a little while. P.S. It may be important to some to include that there is currently no functional geoengineering solution at scale on the planet, even though at the recent COP21 talks in Paris and the IPCC agreements that came out of it, all those agreements lean very heavily on the eventual implementation of geoengineering. You know, in other words, being able to vacuum CO2 out of the sky and so on. And there is virtually no plan without a heavy reliance on geoengineering. And again, that is an entire field that has nothing functional at scale at this time. There are a number of international trade agreements either in place now or soon to be voted into place that encourage corporations to sue national governments for profits thwarted by a country's laws or standards. Here's an example. TransCanada, probably the biggest corporation that was involved with the proposed XL pipeline going across the USA. So I guess we can all applaud that that was turned down, that was rejected as a project. Well, TransCanada has recently submitted a lawsuit against the United States of America for $19 billion in lost profits and thwarted profits. This is not a possible future. This is happening right now. And there are a couple of other trade agreements in addition to the NAFTA, which is what they based their suit on. There are a couple of other soon to be voted on international trade agreements, TPP and TISA come to mind, that will further drive this type of suit into the marketplace. Whenever a corporation's profits are limited, they will be wide open to sue in a tribunal fashion any government that has laws or standards in the way of those profits. I think it's hard to imagine the lofty goals and aspirations of the COP21 agreements being able to happen with a threat of that kind of suit right behind it. So there's precious little conversation anywhere about the irreconcilable nature of a global growth-based economy humming along on bargain-priced oil at the moment, trying to coexist with a newly minted voluntary compliance agreement to reduce CO2 emissions. Again, the COP21 agreements that we're just talking about. There is no disincentive at the moment for the continued use of fossil fuels. There is no collective will to even broach the topic of creating an alternative to a growth-based economy. So let's just stop there. Thank you for your patience listening to that big bunch of data. I do acknowledge it is of the head, it's heady, it's linear, but hopefully it will help us, again, to be on the same page when we are talking about the impact, the potential impact of climate change as we're looking forward into our future. Yeah. So again, please take a breath. It might be a good time to, again, just shake out those arms and hands.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to pause you for a moment there. Just thank you. You know, from the day we met and went through some of this early experiencing of this, you have been so clear that you need to make sure of this for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I've been honored and track this with you, and that you have spent that time that is so precious to really dig in as just a one of us, not a scientist and not necessarily predisposed to understand any of this, but just somebody who's going to say, I got to make sure if I'm going to change my whole life that this is what's going on, and I want to honor you for that process right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So I think I've mentioned a couple times now this term called informed inquiry. And what you've all just sat through is kind of a Reader's Digest condensed version of my informed inquiry, at least the informed part. The informed part is to look for a topic that's of vital importance on your heart. Obviously, for me, it was to vet this abrupt climate change information. I spent quite a bit of time doing that, and I'm, again, very willing to share the resources that I used, if they're at all useful in you doing a similar informed inquiry for yourself. What I'd like to do is just ask on chat if there are any really burning questions out of what I've just shared, or anything that, particularly strong either validation or question or even, argument to some degree. I'd like to not spend too terribly long, and I'm very willing to speak offline if there's something that's substantial and large. This would not be a great place to have a long conversation, but I would like to address, if you have a quick question, something that really stuck out for you in what I just delivered that needs a little bit more attention. So do we have anything on the chat?
Well, thank you. We're open to receiving any there. And again, as we attempt to make this like being together in person, this is an important time that's like, okay, everybody, does anybody have anything really pressing that we want to make sure you have a chance to flush out? Because determining as we go through this 5 weeks, we expect that all of us, I expect even myself, to be going through some ups and downs and some questioning of things I hadn't questioned before. So we understand that this will be an ever-changing thing. And so thank you for being with that and for asking the questions as they come up for you so that you feel as good as you can about moving forward.
Peter, we just got somebody had a question on the chat. What is 1 degree of centigrade equate to in Fahrenheit? And that would be 1.8 degrees. So if you just multiply by the 3 or 5, whatever we've been talking about, times 1.8, you'll get a sense of what that translates into in Fahrenheit language.
And there is another question. Has anyone come up with a descriptive picture of what planetary conditions might look like at 3 to 5 C?
Yeah. There are a couple of pretty decent videos that you can find on YouTube, and I'm happy to, I will hook us up with some links to those at a later date. You know, this is one of the most difficult things for scientists to do, is to accurately model with any kind of accuracy what's going to be happening for sure. But I have found no shortage of scientists who are engaged in this process speaking about massive crop failures. And so we can count on that. We can count on an expansion, a massive expansion of the extreme weather conditions that we're seeing, and just exponentially growing how extreme they show up on a yearly basis. Of course, the water, you know, it's a little bit difficult to talk only about climate change when we also have this incredibly powerful influence of an ever-growing population as well. And that will influence things like the availability of water and the availability of food, or the stressors on the food supply as well. So I don't know if that's a full answer for you, Janaea, but I will get the links out for those videos that I found useful. And others who know more than I do are welcome to chime in on chat if you will.
There's a question here. In place of geoengineering, how about the power of restoring the natural carbon cycle of the soil, which draws down CO2, a key greenhouse gas, also known as soil sequestration agriculture versus our current commercial model? Damaged soil has released an enormous amount of CO2.
Yeah, Melanie, great question. And I've been it's rare that I get to be enthused or excited or encouraged or dare I say hopeful in this process. And that is probably the single most exciting area that I've seen. Is there's a massive movement and a multifaceted movement to do exactly what you're asking in that question, to build through far more restorative farming practices, the ability for the earth to absorb more heat, absorb more carbon, and to be able to basically be the self-cleaning system that it can be. I don't think it's going to be enough of an answer on its own, but it is one of the most powerful elements I've seen included in the equation.
A question from Jan. Do you see that, Dean?
I toured a farm in person with Alan Savory. Very exciting. So there's a link that those who are interested can click on from Jen.
From Jan, there are very authentic, committed, aware scientists who do not agree with Guy McPherson's data and views. How do you relate to that?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I took on this whole process of the informed inquiry to dive in and learn how to learn about these issues rather than just take it hook, line, and sinker from the IPCC or to take it from Guy McPherson. It would be foolish of me to do either one. And so I have found, to my satisfaction, in fact, I got to tell you, you'll see it if you read my book. What has blown me away is how much we've known about these projections and for how long. I have a whole chapter devoted to the shock. I mean, I think everyone on the symposium has full knowledge of the Exxon debacle, where they sponsored world-class science about climate change back in the 70s and 80s, and then proceeded to create, and on the other side of the coin, create the greatest disinformation campaign that's ever hit the planet. But similarly, there have been projections, very clear, powerfully backed up, vetted science that was known back in George H.W. Bush's administration. I will include excerpts from the briefing of his then Secretary of State that indeed projected 3 to 5 degrees C by 2050, by the middle of this century that we're in right now. That's in George H.W. Bush's time frame. So this is not just Guy McPherson making stuff up. This is a long chain of profoundly vetted scientists and their projections, and I think an extraordinarily conservative, and then in addition to that, suppressed IPCC. So that's what I would say to that question.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. And you're on there, Kevin Hester from New Zealand. Great to have you on board, one of the strongest activists in this category of daring to look as deep as we can. He mentions here that he has a Facebook note about the forests. Some people are posting here, Kevin. I don't know if you're able to post it on this chat line, or guessing it's safe to say that Kevin Hester, you can go to his Facebook page and see more great stuff than you can imagine. Thank you, Kevin, for being here and for all that you do and have done. Here's another question. Another question about methane, which I'm glad came up, because there's so many aspects of this multifaceted challenge that we face, and it's hard to talk about all of them, but methane sure seems like the giant elephant in the room that is maybe getting a little bit of play now with what's going on. But man, you talk about the feedback loops, and when it gets warmer in the cold regions and the permafrost melts and the stuff that's under the permafrost starts coming up, that's where the methane challenge comes in, and it's already happening. Although it doesn't get anywhere near the amount of attention in even our press. I don't even in the climate collapse press, we don't talk enough about this.
Okay. I think, I very much appreciate those who've chimed in on chat. Any argument. I don't see anybody resisting the information particularly. In fact, if anything, I'm seeing folks suggest that perhaps I've underestimated or understated it even further. That's fine. I thank you again, all of you, for your patience with this rather heady portion of the presentation of the symposium, and allowing me to share my process of the first part of what I'm calling the informed inquiry of how I gathered my information and what results I've ended up with. And it will, I'm sure, be a lifelong process of continuing to update and upgrade the information, because it's of vital importance, certainly to me, and I think to everyone on the symposium. I think I'd like to just hand it off to Peter and Carolyn to just shift gears slightly from the climate science part of it to perhaps a bit about the social science impact
Yeah.
of climate change.
Thank you, Dean. And again, thanks to all of you who are taking your time to dive deeper with. I really like the metaphors and ways of holding what we're up to visually or through story. And for me, it continues to feel like we're in a lifeboat together. And that the reason that we're here is that we realize that we want to know what's going on, and B, we want to know what skills that we might wish we had as things get bumpier. And that's the purpose of this whole symposium and the power of coming together. You know, we called it the living with passion and purpose in the face of humanity's greatest challenge. The passion part comes when we realize the urgency situation. And that's why we think it's so important that we have some general agreement on roughly what we're looking at here. Because if you really look at what Dean had just talked to you about and really dive into 3 to 5 degrees in the next 30 years, that, wow, you can't help into some kind of urgency with your life. And that's the passion. That's where the passion can come from. And then the purpose comes from realizing that, okay, now that I have this urgency and this passion, how do I rearrange my priorities? What's most important to me? What do I care most about? What do I feel most about? How do I want to live what life I have? And so that's how this kind of doubles up together, and why I love that Carolyn Baker gets to be with us, or we get to be with her, that delightful combination. Because this gal has written so many books and so many posts and interviewed so many people and counseled so many people. Quite literally, the lady on your screen there has worked more in this topic than anyone else in the face of the planet. And I don't take that lightly. And so it's great to hand off to her now this segment, or this stretch that says, so what where do you think we're headed?
Thank you so much, Peter. Just as Dean has given us the science in the physical realm, I'd like to share with you a little bit about the psychological effects. And there's a wonderful article that was on Gizmodo website recently, toward the end of last year. And the title of that article is, "In America, 200 million people will suffer psychological distress from climate change." And most of this information comes from a report that was done, I believe, in 2001 by Dr. Lisa Van Susteren, who's a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I believe, in Washington, D.C. And you can report almost anywhere. It's called The Psychological Effects of Global Warming on the United States. And she talks about how ill-equipped the mental health system in our country is to deal with the psychological effects. So I'd like to share some of these findings with you here in terms of those emotional effects. The report makes 5 major findings. First of all, 200 million Americans will suffer serious psychological distress as a direct result of climate change events, through natural disasters, extreme weather, and all of that. Secondly, it's not there yet, but climate change will become a top-of-mind concern soon. In other words, people may indeed suffer from anxiety about climate change. They'll have a vague unease about what's happening around them, the changes they see in nature and so forth, and the weather events, but they won't be sufficiently aware of the source, because most people are not going to have the science that Dean has given us tonight. Thirdly, already psychologically vulnerable people are at most risk. In the first known climate change delusion, as a depressed 17-year-old boy was hospitalized for refusing to drink water out of fear that it would cause many more deaths in drought-ridden Australia. Now, as I read that, what comes to mind at the moment is the water crisis in Flint. and the psychological effect that that has on people, that they can't, not just can't drink the water, but they can't bathe, they can't brush their teeth with it, they can't wash their dishes with it because it's poison. Therefore, our mental health care system is not prepared for so many new patients. It will be absolutely overwhelmed by people with anxieties and different illnesses, mental illnesses, as a result of climate change. Also, she says in the report that first responders aren't ready. Due to the number of emergency situations in which global climate change and mental health issues will be connected, first responders will need additional education and training to handle the immediate psychological trauma and symptoms of climate disaster victims. So, what mental disorders can we expect to see? Top of the list, violence. As temperatures rise, so do the incidents of violence. Could be exacerbated as communities and cultures are split up, relocated, and potentially find themselves in conflict with their hosts. Displacement stress. Anytime there's a mass migration of people, there's stress in terms of the displacement, culture shock, and all of that. And of course, post-traumatic stress disorder, lots and lots of PTSD among the population. Despair. I'm not going to explain all of these. They're pretty self-explanatory. Anxiety, fear, anger. One thing I will say about that, with increased media coverage educating people about the cause of climate change and the ensuing extreme weather events and other disasters, we can expect more powerful and troubling responses to human-caused climate disasters than when disasters were previously experienced as quote unquote natural or acts of God. So if we just look at all of these mental health issues and the stress that people are going to be experiencing, it's huge. And again, I would refer you to this article. You can Google it. In America, 200 million people will suffer psychological distress from climate change. It's on the Gizmodo website, and in that article, you are directed to the report, The Psychological Effects of Global Warming, by Dr. Lisa Van Susteren. So this is the last piece of really heady intellectual information that we're going to have in the symposium.
Yeah.
And let's just stop and ask ourselves right now, how do you feel? How do you feel as you hear all this? We're going to take a break in a moment, and we would like you to carry this feeling throughout the break. Keep yourselves in a kind of quiet space during the break rather than being chatty or doing trivial stuff or checking your email. Just keep focused on this question. How do I feel when I hear all of this? And when we come back, we will go more deeply into that question. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. Please, again, shake yourself out and use the bathroom, whatever you need to do, and we will be back at 8:10 or 10 minutes after the hour.
All right.
I want to thank all of you for your patience as we created a common foundation for all of us to work on together. We don't intend to have any more big presentations of data and projections in this symposium. We intend to spend the rest of the symposium in a far more important second step of the informed inquiry, the inner inquiry. So I welcome everyone back, and I want to tell everybody that we're now going to build a bridge from the head stuff to the heart stuff. So right now, imagine yourself standing on a threshold in front of a doorway. We've come up to a threshold, and now we're going to cross it together. And when we cross this threshold, we're pretty much done with data and science, facts, and all the heady stuff. that we've just been considering. It doesn't mean we'll never, ever in the symposium talk about science, but pretty much now we're in the territory of the heart. And we're going to be asking you to do a daily 10-minute writing practice. Maybe some of you have spiritual practices, meditation that you do every day, and that's wonderful. But from now on, we're going to focus on the emotional and spiritual aspect of navigating what we're facing. And writing about it for 10 minutes a day, your responses, stuff that comes up for you in this consideration, this inquiry, is very important. So it's important to know that you don't have to do any of this alone. You can connect with other attendees. We now have a Facebook page that is Living with Passion and Purpose. You can go to Facebook and find it. You can connect with any of us. You can talk to me or Dean about coaching. Some of you may be in therapy and you may want to get help from a therapist. It's really fine to get support, and it's very important to get support. I just want to mention, you know, I work with a lot of people who initially come to me and they say, I don't have anyone to talk to. And so what I do is I sit on the computer 3, 4, 5, 8 hours a day looking for the next story that will validate what I know about climate change and the collapse of industrial civilization. And they're worn out, they're freaked out, they're in despair, they're on the edge of depression. And that's because they're just immersing themselves in the head stuff and with no support. So that is absolutely not what we want to be doing in this symposium. So I'd like to open it now to all of you attendees to type in chat or to share something on the screen about how you're feeling and what it's been like for you so far. So we're very open to that, and I believe Peter is moderating.
Yes, I sure will. And of course, it takes time a little bit to sink into questions, but and that's perfectly okay. And that's part of this slowing down, right? That we got back from the break, and I noticed myself already kind of buzzing and okay, what's next? What, you know, feeling myself getting into that and just wanting to stop and say, okay, just a minute. We're just back. We're just sinking into this. And Carolyn, I'd like to ask you actually to speak a little bit more about the societal situation. I thought you were going to dive a little deeper into that at this stage, the feedback loops that we deal with on a societal way. I mean, Dean touched on that, and the article you mentioned clearly pointed at the mental stuff. So you've written a lot about the demise and the collapse of our civilization. Can you spend just a little bit of time with that as we gear toward questions in a few minutes?
Well, I don't know about specifics, but certainly all of these forms of collapse are connected. And I was writing about collapse long before I really learned about the severity of climate change. So I've been looking at that since about 2002, something like that, with peak oil. And so one of the things that's really on the front burner right now in the world is the financial collapse. We're in a global deflationary depression, having to do with partly with the collapse of oil prices, and the fact that most people don't have much of anything to buy anything with. We have debt all over the world, and we're in a very precarious financial situation. And then when you look at that in terms of the connection with climate change and how climate change can even, give a body blow to what is already a severe economic landscape, that's pretty serious. And, in terms of environmental issues, I just look at things like Flint and the water crisis, what's going on in Porter Ranch in California with the methane leaks. All of those things are just, they're connected with each other. And I just see tremendous demise and decay. And it's not happening quickly, it's happening slowly, but each of those slow events from actuated by some sort of crisis that speeds things up. So that's my commentary on that at the moment. I'd like to hear some people in the chat. Peter, you want to tell us what we've got there?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, folks, for chiming in. I want to. Nancy writes, "I'm glad to be connected to people who understand the gravity of the situation, and that's really why we're here. And so, thank you. And when we're together, we feel a different space, a different opening, a different availability to share. And that's the beauty of this symposium, and the beauty of finding those people in your life that you can have that with, whether online or on the phone or in person. A place where I can work on how this feels rather than fight the fossil fuel industry at the day job." Hearing on that, a couple people have chimed in about a beautiful moment here for Randy, who just became a grandma this morning. So let's celebrate you today, Randy.
Congratulations, Randy.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I just found out that my niece is pregnant, so I will have a new little one in my life in 7.5 months or something, I guess. But another person wrote in here too, what about the next generation? So Carolyn, what do you say when people say, how is it for the young people, and how do us folks who have been on watch, while it's not our fault, we were here when it happened. What about that dynamic with the young people?
Well, I think it is partly our fault. The generation of baby boomers is the most privileged generation in the history of the human race. And a lot of it is at our doorstep. Everyone, but we bear a lot of the burden. I think we have really left a disaster to younger people. Everywhere I go, I try to apologize to younger people. Doesn't let me off the hook, but I think older people need to be apologizing to younger people. And I'm finding that a lot of younger folks, millennial folks, are extremely resourceful. We have one of those folks with us tonight named Tyler, who's been on my radio show. Maybe at some point he'll want to chime in. But the prospect of the future for millennials is not good, and for younger children, even worse. In my book, Love in the Age of Ecological Apocalypse, I have a whole chapter on talking with your future and how to do that gently and tactfully. Because it really is not looking good for the younger generations.
Dean, where's your heart when regards to young folk?
I've been speaking with a lot of different people from just about every age range, from young children all the way up to elders. And the one universal that I see, no matter who I'm talking to, no matter what culture, in other words, what country they're living in and what age group they are, it seems that if there is such a thing as a key here to finding a way to stay sane and empowered in the face of all this, is to find a way to do what I call the hard things. It's the things that we don't do very well in the USA in particular. And that is things like having any awareness whatsoever of our shadow. I think it's safe to say that our collective shadow in the USA in particular is a huge part if not the central part of what's gotten us into this trouble that we're in, be that military or economic or environmental, and so on the list goes. And so, again, no matter, I mean, it really shouldn't be a young person's job to get good at breaking their own heart, to be able to get to the love and grace that's on the other side. But I think that's what's really called for. And it's similarly called for in the elder population. And believe it or not, I may be unpopular saying this, but I think children, young children, as soon as it's age appropriate, need to find a way to let the natural, what I call inviting the waves, let the natural expression of their heart come out. You know, in introducing children, young children, to the idea of an older relative dying, and in this case, a whole aspect of our world dying, the kind of defining story of who we are dying, and possibly much more. There's an extraordinary gift awaiting those, and this is just my interpretation, so bear with me. There's an extraordinary gift waiting for those who are willing to break open their hearts volitionally, intentionally, beautifully with one another, and let themselves feel about what's going on. And so that's what I'm seeing, is if there's a universal for us all, no matter the age and so on, it's the willingness to do the hard things, to approach our shadow individually and collectively, and to approach what's sometimes called the way we have flatlined ourselves. We have so many emotions that are just not okay to feel in this culture. And so we tend to live in a very small bandwidth of emotion. Cut out the highs and we've cut out the lows, and we live in this tiny bandwidth of acceptable emotions, and there's not much life there. The people who are willing to dive into that place, and oftentimes the most universal gate to that place is to go through grief. We'll certainly have our share of expressions of that and of conversations about that in this symposium, to look at what is the right place for grief in our world. What's the right place for my exploration of my own shadow as I try to be of service in my community? These are very tough questions. They're very complex questions, but to me, those have been the universal answers or questions that I've surfaced in innumerable conversations with people young and old.
Yeah, and again, this really is about slowing down and deploying our attention in a different way than most of us do most of the time, and just to just be with that question. We're going to have a lot of questions throughout the symposium for you to be with, for you to write about. This is really fertile ground for you to be among friends, among allies, and go more deeply into the emotional, spiritual piece, the psychological, energetic, and spiritual dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a couple of people that we're looking at bringing on to the screen for you, for us all now. And so we'll be doing the technological part of that. And so just so everybody hears this once, if you end up finding yourself in that position, you'll get, chat back and forth with me and the panelists. And then Dean will send you a note, or it'll click to you to accept that the Dean is bringing you on to become a panelist. And then you have to click that you accept. And then you'll come on screen with us here. And if you're willing for your face to be shown, then, and if you rather that not happen, then you can put the stop video button, which will be in the bottom left. But ideally, we'd like to see your smiling face. And I see here that we have now perfected that strategy, and we have Marilyn joining us. Marilyn, thank you so much for your shares on the chat and for being willing to come forth and and be with us here.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be here. And hi, Carolyn, and hi, Dean, hi, Peter. I've been following all of your work for a while, and I just spoke up because I'm kind of probably one of the younger people here at 29, and I found Carolyn's work a couple of months ago. Actually, it's been about 8 months or 6 months now, and it just touched my heart so much. And I kind of found her work through Derek Jensen's work, found his work through kind of my own grieving process that led me to environmental activism, which is kind of random, but being here among people that are probably mostly a little bit older than me, a generation older than me, it actually feels very soothing to my heart to know that I don't have to be a young person who's also a young mother facing this alone, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Marilyn, thank you so much for coming on to the screen with us. You know, I'm moved. There is something about us being able to share across the miles. I don't even know where you are in this world, and I feel so very close, and I so much appreciation for your sharing. And I'm really struck by how similar what you're sharing is to so many other conversations I've had, especially with folks about your age or younger. There is so much life that wants to be lived. And there is so much sorrow in my heart. You know, there's been a couple of mentions in the chat here of apologies and how good it felt to be apologized to. And so in a ritual fashion, if you will be kind enough to receive an apology, I apologize. I have been looking for myself for quite some time at how I've been complicit in all of this. And of course we all are. That is the truth of it. And in a way that involves as little shame and fear as possible, I've been looking at how can I be responsible for the rest of my life to the best of my ability? How can I bring from my heart my best gifts to people like yourself, to the people around me, whatever my gifts are. And I'm hoping and I'm predicting that there are quite a few people on this call that are in a similar place. They may not do what Carolyn does, which is write these incredible list of books that are right on topic, but each of us brings our gifts. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Was there anything else you would like to say?
No, I'm just really, honestly, the greatest part of all of this is the sense of community that is now forming that was never there in my life before, ever, just because it was something that, sorry, I'm going to cry now, but it's good. I know tears are healing. So, I mean, just knowing that that is developing ongoingly as we connect more and more is really powerful. And I'm sure that is what I hope to give to my son who's 4 now, like just letting him know what's really happening and letting him know the solution is to be present, to find your heart, to love, to find your community, because that is what is helping me get through it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. You know, I want to keep you on for another moment. I really appreciate that you sat with the break time, and according to your post there, you just did some automatic writing, which has always been such a powerful thing for me, to just sit with a question or a thought and just start writing and see what shows up. Tell us a little bit about what showed up for you at the break.
Well, I'll just bring out my notepad. I just happen to have a notepad here, and your suggestion of just kind of sitting and, you know, feeling after what we talked about, I just wrote to myself that I was feeling like, well, what can I do to prepare? What is the best way to prepare? And my heart just said, look, you have to prepare to love. You have to prepare and learn to love again, I guess, and prepare to do it from here all the way to the other side, whatever that is. Whether it's death, whether it's, you know, a positive outcome, whether it's a really, really, we can't know what it is. All we can know is how to love, have those channels be open so that no matter what we're doing in whatever outcome there's going to be, we can find a way to be of service, because that is really what I feel like is the greatest gift of this whole thing, is pushing us to remember our love and our ability to serve others, which helps us form community.
Yeah, thank you
Beautiful.
so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. That I want to take that and lead back to Carolyn with relationships and how we connect to a lot of different people. But first, I want to say, Marilyn, we're not positive how the technology works here when we send you away from being on video here. So if we happen to lose you, you might have to re-enter the code or re-hit the link to get back on. But again, thank you for being that first guest, and blessings, and thanks for sharing.
Carolyn.
Thank you.
And what she said really led me to this. She's calling forth this love, right? This love in the age of ecological apocalypse. And as you wrote in the book, Carolyn, the relationships we need to thrive, that as we talk about being on a lifeboat and we talk about needing skills to deal with the things that are coming, we have all these different relationships, and you address those in the book. And I guess I want you to somehow magically capsulate your book in 1.5 minutes. Ready, go.
Well, what I do is I take, like there are thousands and probably millions of relationships that we have every day with people and things. And so what I did is I just took 16 relationships and I talked about what's our relationship with the earth, what's our relationship with food, what's our relationship with our children and our families, and with money, and with all different kinds of things, and looking at our lives in terms of relationship. And then there are practices and suggestions in the book for how we work with those and how we use those relationships as teachers.
Peter, I'd like to just say a little something about a phrase that I used a little while ago called inviting the waves. That's my jargon that I came up with. I guess I grew up as a surf rat in Southern California, and everything shows up as waves to me. And grief and the other emotions that run through our body, they're no exception. In fact, it's a great metaphor for me. And I'd like to invite everybody, make it explicit, that your waves are welcome here. It's been the most freeing, empowering part of this entire informed inquiry process for me in these past couple of years, and especially being with the team with Carolyn. There's always an open invitation with us to feel what we need to feel in the moment. In fact, that takes priority. And I think that's rare, certainly rare in my life. And it's rare in the lives of the people that I get to interact with and talk with each day. So I'd like to keep that open invitation here whenever we get together for any of the sessions of the symposium, to make it safe for, and then please, I ask that you invite in yourself whatever is the truth in the moment for you. For me, that can be an extraordinary wave. Like if I just took a moment, and I invite you to do this with me for a moment, if we just took one small sliver of that long talk that I let out with, that all that data and all those projections and blah, blah, and the one piece that I'd like us all to just stop for a moment and feel is what if indeed we were to be experiencing all the habitat destruction implied with 5 degrees centigrade above baseline by 2050, or some were suggesting 2030. Doesn't really matter, does it? And if we just pause for a moment and realize the implications that within our lifetime, that involves massive suffering and dying and collapse of systems. Things that we've relied on, things that we call normal, are really called to question now. All the most simple things, like being able to go to a big box store nearby and buying something that was made around the world and cost just a few dollars, including all the the transportation to get it there and blah, 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 everything, literally everything we touch will be shifted by this. I've been deeply moved by Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, because it truly does. And if I allow myself to slow down, as we are asking all of us to slow down in this symposium and feel, what does it feel like knowing that literally everything in our lives will be impacted by what we're talking about within our lifetime, even for an old guy like me, within my short remaining years. So I invite us all to be thinking and feeling in that way. And for me, that means a very rich writing practice. We're asking you to be journaling every day for at least 10 minutes. And heck, I'd say longer if you can. And to allow yourself to feel and then put the stream of consciousness, those feelings, into that daily writing. Carolyn, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, that's okay. I was just going to suggest that we do a little bit of writing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe look at a couple of questions before we finish up tonight. So if we're open and ready for that, Dean and Peter, is this a good time?
Works for me.
Yep.
Okay. So I have two questions for you to start. First one is, what do you love or appreciate about your life? Or what are you grateful for? It basically is the same question. What do you love or appreciate about your life, or what are you grateful for? Let's take a few minutes to write about that.
And, Carolyn, we have a very few minutes left, and I'm noticing on the screen that Joanne would like to share a bit about what it is to be a mother of adult children and her feelings about that. And my sense is it's completely aligned with that question. So if we could have Joanne sharing and the writing going on for those for whom it's correct to write at this time, I'd like to do them both, because otherwise I think we'll miss the opportunity.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, Joanne, I'm almost there.
Very good. So thanks for your flexibility and spontaneous action there, Dean. And we'll have her on with us in here in just a moment. There she is.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Carolyn and Dean. I hope to meet you sometime, Peter.
Hi,
I
Joanne.
spent 30 years of my life raising 3 kids, and boy, they turned out great. It was my life's work, and now I have a grandchild. And I pretty much made peace with the fact that the last 20 years of my life, I'm an old guy like Dean. I'm 62. My mate is almost 62. Are you 62? Almost 62. And I pretty much made peace with the fact that if we're not going to be comfortable, they'll be scary, and I'll be called to do a lot of growing that I haven't done yet. But I've lived a pretty soulful life, and I don't know whether my children are going to have the chance to make those crossings, to have enough time to understand some of the things that I now understand. So a lot of what's on my mind is, how can I make their physical lives, what can I do to give them the chance to live a few extra years, or live in a better place? What can I do to make their lives better in the same way that I've always done that? That's what's most on my mind. I'm grateful for that experience of raising them, and I'm most afraid that they won't have a chance to become themselves. I think that's it.
Thank you, Joanne. Yeah. So in case people are wondering how this sharing that Joanne's doing, that others of us are doing right now, how does this fit in the big picture of what this symposium is about? I believe that what we're suggesting is that people who are willing to bring their tears, bring a freshly broken open heart to others, kindred spirits, if you will, that there's grace there. There is no answer to this. There is no life hack to this. There's no 8 special ways to stay happy in this one. But I think what there is there's a grace that's available when we find people with whom it's safe to open our hearts. Joanne, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joanne.
If when we're done, I don't know if Carolyn might have a question for you, but Joanne, when I do click the button to take you off of the panel, as Peter said, if I happen to do the wrong thing and kick you out, please come back with the link. Okay?
I think I know how to do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And what comes up for me there in that your willingness, your vulnerability to say, yes, I'll come on the screen, and yes, I'm crying, and yes, I feel this deeply, and yes, we are juggling the grief and the gratitude somehow at the same time. It's such a paradoxical situation that we are not used to doing it this way, and really honor that vulnerability. Yeah.
Okay, Joanne, I'm going to try and take you off the panel without kicking you out. So let's cross our fingers.
And as she shifts, I'm seeing that we're getting a few messages from Apperdat, who is our friend in Chico, who may not want her name mentioned because she's famous around the world. But she mentioned something that's really vital to my ability to juggle the grief and the gratitude, and that is to be in touch with that part of us that's so much bigger than our humanity, than our planet, than our galaxy. You know, the story of the Is It Here, which is an amazing body of work by Brian Swim, and that how can we infuse that grander aspect of ourselves into this very human grief and gratitude juggling.
I'd like to just jump on that, also tag along, Peter, on your comment and I see the comment from Apperdat. In my book, Love in the Age of Ecological Apocalypse, one of the relationships I talk about is our relationship with the universe. And I've got a whole chapter called Our Relationship with the Powers of the Universe. I won't go into details here, but Brian Swim, a mathematical cosmologist, physicist, he talks about these powers of the universe and how our job as human beings is to live with and embody. And if everyone were doing that, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight about how this planet is withering and we all may be extinct in a few years. So I encourage you to learn everything you can about Brian Swim's work, The Story of the Universe, and you can read the chapter in here if you have the book.
You know, Carolyn, I'd like to shift to the next question if you feel all right with that.
Sure, absolutely. Let's do.
Okay. So possible in this next one in a relatively short burst, what are some of your specific fears for yourself, your family, your community, as you face the things we're talking about? And please feel free to just quickly tap in your responses on chat so we could get a quick sense of some of the fears that we're carrying together.
While you're coming up with that, just take another big breath. And Marilyn writes in about fears that people will lose their light, that in the face of this status quo and this egoic perspective we've been marinating in, that we'll lose our ability to remember. Thank you, Marilyn. And Carolyn is muted, so she's trying to talk to us, but she didn't. There you go, Carolyn.
Janaea mentions fear of not finding the community of people I want to spend these decades with. Absolutely, and that's one reason we're doing this symposium.
So Nancy
says
her.
Go ahead, Dean.
Her fear is of chaos, fighting for scarce resources, massive loss of life in climate chaos, that I would lose my home and my place in the world, that life will be scary and out of control.
And the next person says, scared that we will live out our collective shadows. True.
And doesn't that open a whole other can of shadow worms, worm shadows? And Carolyn, I know that's the topic of your most recent book is, as again, we go back to the metaphor, we're in the boat, there's bumpy roads ahead, we're trying to do this together and individually, and one of the skills we need is to deal, what is this shadow thing anyway? And what is our grief? And how in the world is it going to help me if I get in touch with my grief and shadows? Tell us about that.
Well, the shadow is any part of us that we say is not me. I'm not a racist. I don't pollute the earth. I'm not this, I'm not that. It's a part of ourselves that we deny because we're ashamed of it. We don't want people to know, it would mess up our image and so forth. And we not only have individual shadows, we have collective shadows. And so this person was talking about the collective. Is huge. It's a shadow of violence, racism, entitlement, narcissism, all the things that have brought us to where we are now. And so our work is to heal our individual and collective shadows. We're going to be talking about that a lot in this symposium. And so that's related to grief too, because grief is something we shove into the shadow and say, well, I'm not going to grieve because that's weak. Activists especially are guilty of this. If I grieve, I'll lose my passion for activism. So we'll be talking about all that as we go on. And Carolyn says, I'm afraid of no food in the grocery stores and not enough water to grow a garden, starvation.
Yeah, I'm glad you wrote again. Glad you wrote again, Caroline, because I saw your post up higher and wanted to acknowledge that and just supportive for all of us in our journeys to share this message. And many of you out there are doing what you can to share the message, to talk to others, to be supportive of the messengers, much like you are right now. I want to take a moment as we start to wind down today to really to thank you and hope that you can receive that by signing up and doing this symposium with us. You are supporting getting Carolyn's workout, getting Dean's workout, getting my workout, getting all the people that we'll talk about and all the links that you'll share with each other, all the networking that will happen, all the people that will feel like they have someone to talk to. I mean, we can't minimize, we could, and that's what we tend to do, but I suggest that we don't minimize the importance of just taking a step like this and being on this program and sharing this program with others, and all the good message.
So Peter, we are just about getting toward the wrap-up phase, and I'd like to just squeeze in one last question and ask as many of the participants to answer as possible. I'm curious if you have a sense of what your calling is in the face of these remarkable circumstances. Do you have a sense of your calling, and can you express that in a few words to us in chat?
Yeah, how is your heart calling you to respond to our predicament?
What is emerging through me as I feel this, as I dare to really feel it? Because like someone else mentioned, it can feel like I'm watching a movie sometimes, and I get separated that way. It's like, wow, I'm watching an apocalyptic movie. But I can, when it's over, I'm just gonna, go make myself a snack and go to bed. But to really feel it and to really try to grasp it, what beauty is emerging from me at this time? What is calling forth? And we know that everyone is feeling this question, and whether you attempt it to write or not, is completely up to you. And please don't put any judgment on yourself if you do or you don't.
So we've got a couple people. Marilyn is saying calling is develop a design for education, willing people in all of the areas we will need to be skilled or able in, from emotional to spiritual to practical. Nancy goes on to say, yes, I know my calling and have been working on it for a decade. It's getting the electric utilities industry to reduce fossil fuels. As far as feelings go, I'm trying to listen to the sadness and deal with it rather than push it away. Joanne is saying, I want to tell stories about how people are living now, what they are facing, what they're feeling. There's another comment, love deeply in the present moment and be very creative in my actions. That's Judith saying that. Kevin from New Zealand saying again, I want to encourage everyone, most especially the young, to live in the now and to live their dreams on the basis that time is shorter than everyone thinks. My mom taught us that 50 years ago. And Carolyn, I'm curious if we're kind of running into our last few minutes. I think you said that you might have a poem to share.
Joy and Grief. And here's a short one by the Hawaiian poet Rashani. There is a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable. There is a sorrow beyond all grief which leads to joy, and a fragility out of whose depths emerges strength. There is a hollow space too vast for words through which we pass with each loss, out of whose darkness we are sanctioned into being. There is a cry deeper than all sound, whose serrated edges cut open to the place inside that is unbreakable and whole while learn to sing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, people have been really chiming in now, many of them to panelists, just to us panelists. So thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Bill. Tyler, who's the young man who's been on Carolyn's show, wants to offer healing actions, reforesting the earth, so that something will be left for life to continue to evolve. Bill from Oregon saying that he's doing everything he can to build tribe, to live a life where we realize this lifeboat situation is happening. And so who do I want in my lifeboat? And he's done some amazing, we can plug a link in on the next show, Bill, for some of the work that you've done with tribe building. Is an amazing program.
So we've got some really heavy hitters in terms of participation on the planet on this symposium, and I'm really hoping that you will be liberal in your sharing of your gifts. And you know who I'm talking to out there, really all of you. Please share your gifts fully on the Facebook page, and then continue to share in the chats in the future episodes of this symposium. There's extraordinary gift exchange possible here in terms of the human gift that we are for each other.
And I'd like to ask everyone to who does Facebook to go to our Facebook page, Living Your Passion and Purpose. Please visit it, like it, use it, and talk about the symposium on other Facebook friends. You know, like, wow, it is a symposium, and it's, you know, it's outrageous. I love it. And then again, I want to remind you of the daily writing practice, a minimum of 10 minutes each day. And I'm very pleased to let you know that next week, Andrew Harvey will be with us. He'll be with us in a video recorded interview, and he'll also be coming on live for us to talk with him and do Q&A. So thank you all so much for being with us tonight. We've gone through the first doorway of the journey, and now it's going to get really, really rich.
So, Carolyn, I'd like to just do one last thing with everyone, if you would. We've just got a couple of moments, and ideally we'll be done just a couple of minutes early. I'd like to ask each of the participants to get on chat for one last moment. And would you share a word or two that expresses some portion of your experience of this global circle that we've temporarily created with each other? So this is a checkout, a chance to just express yourself and what you've experienced this evening, and perhaps express a little bit about what you're looking forward to as we meet again in a couple days. So please chime in, and thank you all so much for bringing yourselves to this symposium. It is a gift, and we are clear about that, and we are thankful for your participation with us. Thank you. Connection and joy, having allies. Big hug to all. Thank you for the community. Gratitude and appreciation. Precious, privileged. All right.
Yeah, there is a feeling of connection in this topic that is just creates such a beautiful thing. Grounded community. Thank you, Tyler. Privileged to be with you. Authenticity. Yes, that's where we hope to be as the guides, and where we hope to guide you to that depth of vulnerability and authenticity to say what it is, how it's moving through you.
And I just really invite anyone who can be there live when we are there with Andrew coming up Thursday. Andrew's whole notion of sacred activism is so completely hand in glove fit with this symposium and with what we've been sharing tonight. You will not be disappointed. In fact, it will be hairs sticking up on your skin kind of excitement with just how gorgeously his work fits with what we've been talking about. So I look very much forward to seeing you all in a couple of days.
And also, I want to let everyone know that we will be sending you a link for access to this video recording on YouTube so that you can have it. We'll send you a special password. We ask you not to share it with other folks. It's just for you. It's just for the people who are participants of this symposium, but you're going to have access, and we'll send that to you this week.
And we do appreciate if you feel moved to tell any of your friends or colleagues that, of course, they could still sign up for the symposium, and they would get this recording as well. That would be greatly appreciated. And that with this next show and all the rest of them until the last one, you know, most of the first hour will be a recorded interview with our special guest. It will be time for lots of Q&A and probably a little bit of shaking around and a little bit of a writing exercise and and daring to do what we can to help you call yourself forth.
Y'all, thank you very much for your participation with us. Please take care of yourselves. Be gentle. Do your writing. We can't wait to hear what the results are of your writing. And thank you for joining us. Good night.
We don't have to end, do we?
Yeah. Good night.
No, it's only.
Thanks so much, guys. See you next week.
Love you.
Bye-bye.